Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bible Illustrated Hands. Today's question comes from a YouTube commenter, Pray Unceasingly. He or she asks, Boyan, how do you deal with criticism of stories like Noah and the Ark being unscientific? People say science disproves this story. This is unsettling to deal with for me when people make such criticisms. Thank you for your question, Pray. Personally, I have no issues whatsoever at the story being unscientific because I personally believe that the story is much greater than a simple historical retelling. Why? Let's start with the most obvious thing. Even if the story of the flood didn't happen literally as described in the book of Genesis, that story is a very, very good description of the church. And it's no wonder that St. Peter describes the church as Noah's Ark in his epistle, and the saints have done so over and over again because we can only be saved through the church. And if you're not part of the church, well, you're in a horrible, horrible position. Again, I'm a firm believer that people who are formally outside of the church can be saved, but only through the church, that is by the prayers of the church and so on. So that's one thing. Second thing, this is on the pretty much on the surface level. By the way, I'm drawing Pope St. Celestine again, this time officially for the Bible Illustrated. The other thing is that we should always be mindful of how damaging sin is. And we see that over and over repeated in the Old Testament. People usually say that God in the Old Testament is always angry and so on. It's not like that he is always angry. It is that the sin is so horrible, and because we keep seeing sin from our own sinful perspective, we can't even begin to comprehend how bad it is. But that's the surface level. But there's one final and I think most important part of the Genesis narrative, and this is something that is generally used against Christianity or Judaism or Islam. But I think it it is actually an argument for. That is that surrounding cultures also had their own flood myths, but this is where things differ in a huge way, because while these stories are very similar on a surface level, you can definitely see that the Christian version or Judaic is taking a stance against those versions. Why? In those versions, you have gods who conspire against one another, and in flood in Genesis, it is God's soul. It is solely the decision of God. Then let us go forth. Some gods want the flood. Some gods don't want the flood. Then again, when everything's sunk, gods fly like fleas to the smell of sacrifice. So basically, gods are enabling humanity to survive so that humans can provide them with sustenance. Where there is no such thing in the Genesis. It is solely the act of mercy of God that humanity is allowed to survive. Furthermore, the fact that Noah survives in other myths, I can't remember the name of the Gilgameshian Noah. I think it is I had Utnapishtim, yeah. He only survives by an whimsy of one goddess, you know. So actually, the Genesis narrative is a big hit against the paganism and pagan view of gods. I hope they help you somehow, and time is running up on my phone. Bye.